Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of accommodating employees during COVID-19. This is our session specifically for employees to know your rights during this time. Just as a reminder, we will not have a YouTube live stream today. However, we will be live streaming on Facebook. An alternative caption link has been provided on the Facebook Live event. Although we do encourage anyone who needs the reliable and consistent captioning as an accommodation to register at www.michigan.gov/ADA30 and to join the Zoom event. Again, that's www.michigan.gov/ADA30. Today we have some prepared questions that our panelists will be answering. We will also have time for a live Q&A following the prepared questions. To participate in the Q&A, you will be typing your question in the chat. For now, the chat is closed, but we will be opening the chat once it's time for the live Q&A. In our effort to educate the public, our panelists and our speakers today will be saying their name before they speak. This is helpful for the captioner, as well as those listening on the phone or anyone who may be blind or otherwise require this as an accommodation to follow today's session. And with that, I will pass it over to Deputy Director Sean Egan.
Sean Egan. Thank you, Kelly. I am honored to give a quick intro for this session on accommodating employees during COVID. I am the Director of Workplace Safety for the state of Michigan as it relates to COVID, as well as the Deputy Director for Labor in Michigan's Department of Labor. We have a lot of workplace requirements and rules right now based on COVID, and certainly accommodating employees that need those accommodations is critical. And I really appreciate you having this discussion today to help employees navigate the COVID crisis. One thing I like to remind everybody of is how the virus spreads. There is a 24/7 news cycle and a lot of noise as it relates to COVID, but some things have been constant. And that includes that this disease spreads primarily through large respiratory droplets and aerosols that we create when we talk, breathe, cough, or sneeze. And the way that we're mitigating the risk of transmission is to ensure that we keep that social distance, that we wear the face coverings if we're medically able when we can't maintain that 6 feet of social distance, and that we're practicing good hygiene so we're not picking up the virus from contaminated surfaces. All of the workplace rules and the executive orders are pretty much built around these concepts, and they make more sense when you start to look at them in that way. Congregating or getting too close seem to be the areas that we see both with our own data as well as in the news of causing these kinds of outbreak events. So we're really focused on that. But we understand, the governor understands, and certainly the discussion today recognizes that some employees will need some accommodations to deal with these requirements. And we are certainly working to assist that where we can. And of course, the Michigan Department of Civil Rights and others are working hard to educate on these topics. In the workplace, if you have issues related to workplace safety at all and workplace safety as it relates to COVID, feel free to go to MIOSHA and file a complaint. You can do that anonymously if you feel that's necessary, and that will trigger an inspection and investigation related to the workplace. And it's critical that you engage in this process. If you need more information, you can go to our website at michigan.gov/COVID workplace safety, which we have flyers, posters, guidelines, all created by MIOSHA based on the executive orders and CDC guidelines for what employers should be doing in the workplace. There are videos and other tools there as well to help you understand what the employers need to be doing, as well as what employees should be doing in the workplace to help us make sure that we contain COVID. We also have a hotline available at 855-SAFE-C19 that goes directly to my OSHA. The average wait time right now is about 15 seconds. So it's a great resource that you can use. And leading this discussion today as you talk through these critical issues is Robin Jones, the director of the Right Place ADA Center. And I will turn it over to Robin. Thank you.
Robin, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Robin Jones, and thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with everybody today for day 2. We had a very lively discussion yesterday and lots of questions from the audience. So thank you very much, and I hope that everyone is ready for today as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the ADA and address this very important issue. Could I have the next slide, please? So registration today, you're all here, hopefully. So that meant that you registered and would allowed you to access both yesterday and today's session, and they are being recorded. The presentation materials for today are available on the ADA 30 virtual events page, which is www.michigan.gov/ADA30. There will also be follow-up resources posted on the session page for today's topic on that same website, which I just gave. Please note, as was indicated as we first started this morning, that the chat box will remain closed until the start of the live Q&A session, but we are anxious for you to submit questions. So think about what those might be and just jot them down so that you're ready when we open the chat area to enter them. Next slide, please. To that end, just some guidance on how we're going to handle the live Q&A. During that live session today, you, as a registered participant, can submit questions in the following options. 1, written. You can type your question into the chat box once we open it up. If you are on the phone or you would like to speak or auditorily give your question, click the raise hand option in order to speak and you'll be called upon. If you're on the phone, press *9 and we'll also be able to call upon you then. Please note that any inappropriate or threatening language and behavior will not be tolerated, and that those who engage in this type of activity will be muted for the remainder of the meeting or also potentially risk being removed entirely from this session. If you have any questions or concerns around the accessibility of your experience today with the Zoom platform, you can go to their website at https://zoom.us/accessibility, or you can also call them at 1-888-799-9666. So let's move forward with our session. The next slide here, thank you. I'm going to introduce our panelists today, our distinguished guests who have already spent one day in this process and are anxious to interact with you again today. So our first that we'll introduce is Lolita Davis, who is the Outreach and Training Coordinator for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, often referred to as the EEOC.
Lolita Davis, good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this morning.
Okay, Robin Jones again. Next is Kim Woolridge, who is the Director of the State ADA Compliance Division in the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, which is also known as MDCR.
Good morning, Robin. Thank you, and thank you all for joining us again today for this session.
Robin Jones again. Next is Linda Watson, who is the Business Relations Consultant for Michigan Rehabilitation Services, also known as MRS, in the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, also known as LEO or LEO.
Good morning, Linda Watson here from MRS. Happy to be here and thanks for being here today.
Robin Jones again. Our next speaker is Leah Avant, who is a deaf-blind vocational counselor for the Bureau of Services for the Blind Persons, also known as BSBP.
Good morning, this is Leah speaking. Thank you all for joining us.
Great, Robin Jones again. Annie Oraski, who is the director of the Division of Deaf, Deaf-Blind, and Hard of Hearing, and this is a long acronym. This is DODDBHH.
Hello, this is Annie speaking. Good morning. I'm happy to be here today for part 2, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. And I think we're on our way here. So this is Robin again. And will you give us the next slide, please? Our first question for our panelists. I kind of feel like we're in jeopardy here. Can employees be fired or disciplined for refusing to come to work if they have tested positive for COVID-19 or are exhibiting any symptoms? Second to that question is, what if it is only a member of their household who has tested positive for COVID-19 or is exhibiting symptoms? So Kim, how about you starting us off today and taking that one?
Thank you, Robin. This is Kim speaking. And to answer the question, employees have protections under the Family First Coronavirus Act, which went into effect, I believe it was April 1st, and currently is in effect until December 31st of this year. And it provides protections for employees who have COVID-19 and protections for them to take care of family members who have coronavirus and COVID-19. And it prohibits employers from discharging those employees if they need to take time off to recover from the virus or to take care of family members, or if they have had exposure to the virus. It provides other protections too, but to answer your question, there are protections against discharge for that.
Okay. Anyone else have anything they would like to add in? Lolita?
Good morning, Lolita speaking. Since the EEOC has not addressed whether COVID-19, someone with COVID-19 is an individual with a disability under the ADA, we wouldn't take issue with that right now. So like Kelly was saying, you do have the Family First Coronavirus Act. You also have that executive order 2020-36 that also protects employees in the workplace from being discharged or disciplined because of, testing positive or exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19.
And just to clarify, Lolita, that's a federal executive order, not a state of Michigan executive order, correct?
That's the state of Michigan executive order, okay. Lolita speaking. This is state from Governor Whitmer, right, Kim?
That's correct. That is an executive order under Governor Whitmer.
Okay, great. Just wanted to clarify it so people weren't confused as to where that was coming from, since EOC was one talking about it. So sometimes we can get confused about those things. So thank you. Anyone else before we move on to our next question? Okay, next slide, please. Our next question is, can employees be fired or disciplined for refusing to come to work in order to protect themselves or a high-risk member of their immediate household from being exposed to COVID-19? So this is a little different take on the previous question. So this is the situation we're talking about here of, can I be fired or disciplined for not wanting to come to work, not because I have it or not because a member of my family has it, but because I'm concerned about my exposure and what that might do to myself or a family member. So Lolita, do you want to start off on that one?
Yes, Lolita speaking. So like I previously said, because since it's not, we haven't addressed it as COVID being a disability under the ADA, even though the ADA prohibits the discrimination because of that association with someone with a disability. The ADA would not require the employer to accommodate the employee unless they had some type of disability based on the disability related needs of the family member. So, for example, an employee without a disability, you wouldn't be entitled to telework as an accommodation to protect the family member. Now, of course, during this time, we would hope that the employer will, be flexible in some of the choices that they make, to provide you with some type of accommodation or flexibility. And as long as they are careful about how they engage in that, because you don't want it to turn into a disparate treatment type case where you're treating women differently. Age could be a factor too, where you may be treating someone differently because of their age. So unfortunately, we wouldn't have jurisdiction. But the good thing about it is, as an employee, is we're providing you with these resources, but it is also important for you to go and read that executive order 2020-36 so that you will know what what your protections are, in addition to the Family First Coronavirus Act.
And just for clarification, Lolita, if it's myself that has the concern and I believe that I'm eligible under the Americans with Disabilities Act because of my health condition that is making me fearful of that particular exposure, I could go through the reasonable accommodation process, correct?
Yes, Lolita here. Yes, I have respiratory issues, so I have a medical condition that I'm protected under the ADA. So I can request some form of reasonable accommodation to telework,
Okay, great. Anyone else have anything additional they would like? Yes, go ahead, Kim.
Like mentioned yesterday, this is Kim speaking, and to address the last part of what you were discussing, under ADA, they would have protections if they had some kind of underlying impairment that rises to the level of disability. ADA covers employers with 15 or more employees. Michigan has its own Civil Rights Act, the Michigan Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act, which would cover employers with 1 or more employees. So you would have that protection. And again, like you emphasized, people could just Google, or I'm sure we will have in the additional handout information, a link to the governor's executive order, or if you want to look at it now, you could just Google Michigan Executive Order 2020-36. 36, thank you. If you just Google that, you can find it. And the Family First Coronavirus Act, you can find out information about that. Thank you. Great,
thank you. Okay, I think we'll move on to question number 3. Okay, so a couple parts to this one. An employer requires returning workers to wear personal protective gear, often referred to as PPE, and engage in infection control practices. Employees may ask for accommodations due to a need for modified protective gear. Are employers required to grant these requests if an employee has a disability? Linda, could you take that question, please?
Absolutely. Linda Watson from MRS again. So under OSHA, an employer must provide PPE at the employer cost, but just like any other reasonable accommodation request, that employee needs to make their needs known and discuss that with the employer. Then the interactive process begins, at which the employee and the employer can have a discussion about the employee needs versus those requirements and how to make an appropriate accommodation regarding those. So there are some really good examples that we've seen recently regarding this. One of the best examples that I've seen is an employer, a retail employer was requiring their employee to wear latex gloves, and every time that they touched something that was also touched by the public, they had to change out those latex gloves. We've all been hearing that, you know, latex gloves are a pretty common form of PPE. But what if you have fine motor difficulties and you can't independently take off those latex gloves? Is there a possible solution, or do you need to go on short-term disability or quit your job? That's where an accommodation comes in. So in that particular solution, what we came up with when we worked with that employee and that employer is to use the deli gloves. So if you're aware, deli gloves, they fit over your hand, but they're a little bit bigger, easier to remove and put on a new pair. Same person had fine motor difficulties putting a mask on and taking it off. And because this person was required to go out into the parking lot, when they were out in the parking lot, they were permitted to take the mask off as long as they were not within a certain distance of a customer or another employee. Unfortunately, because of those fine motor difficulties, putting on that mask, taking that on and off proved very difficult. So working with that person in that business, we help them with a scarf that is just easily pulled up and pulled down. Lots and lots of solutions that you can come up with when you creatively think outside the box. The same can go for like a clear mask versus that solid mask to help someone who needs that ability to communicate and read lips, and they can't do that with a regular mask. So a clear plastic mask is a good alternative there. So the answer to this question is yes, the employer can provide a reasonable accommodation if that individual qualifies, and there are lots of solutions to a potential problem.
Linda, you talked a lot about, you know, the communication issues, obviously that affect people who are deaf and hard of hearing and such. And then somebody with fine motor. What about, and we hear this sometimes in our office, we get questions from people who have mental health issues, anxiety, or other types of claustrophobia, or other kinds of things that putting the mask on, you know, does affect them, you know, psychosocially. Any thoughts, or have you had any experiences in that realm as well? Because we want to make sure we're looking at kind of a broader spectrum of disability than sometimes is often talked about.
Truly. Linda Watson again speaking. In regards to anxiety or any other mental illness, mental health needs, things like that, folks are experiencing panic symptoms and different things related to wearing those PPE. They feel confined, they feel restricted. And of course, we're doing this to help everyone stay healthy and stay well. And if we restrict someone's breathing during a panic attack, that could potentially be problematic. So first and foremost, I encourage this person during that discussion with their employer to gain some reassurance from the business, find out about those safety protocols. What is this business doing? Why are we doing this? You know, what potential differences can I put into place so that way I can successfully perform my position? So maybe that involves moving this person to a separate area, giving them breaks, not just one break in the morning, one break in the afternoon, breaking those breaks up, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 5 minutes there throughout the day, so that person can have a break from wearing that mask, go to a designated area where they're allowed to remove that mask. Peer support is also very helpful. So Robin, it really truly depends on the needs of that individual. So those are some overall suggestions, but it would depend on what that individual was going through. And that's why that interactive process is so important, because everybody's unique.
I think it's great to reinforce that. Annie, go ahead.
Hi, this is Annie Yuraski speaking. I did want to add a little bit here, specifically when we're talking about deaf, blind, and hard of hearing residents. This time of this COVID pandemic is really causing so much more stress because of the barriers to communication access, because of having to wear a mask. Most people are wearing the kind of masks that cover your face, that cover your mouth. So it's hard to see facial expressions, body language, it's hard to read lips. So you miss out on a lot of communication, and that's a very important part of ASL. So for employees who need that accommodation, like it has been mentioned, that interactive process is so much more important now. You have to be able to have that discussion and be creative with your solutions. So, if you need to communicate and that is an issue with a disability, you have to be very creative. Those clear masks that were mentioned, face shields, using speech to text apps for your phone, using a whiteboard to communicate, you just have to be creative with your solution options. And it's important for employers not to make the assumption, or employees not to make the assumption that the employers know what your needs are, or they understand fully about communication access and why masks would be a barrier to that. Right now, everyone is dealing with a high level of stress when they're thinking about the number one thing, which is their safety. So, communication access typically is not the priority for many people. I think it's important that we recognize that interactive process is important, but also stress why and what other tools can be used for the community. But I also wanted to add that specifically when we're talking about deaf-blind individuals, they also have vision and hearing loss. So they might need an interpreter. It's specifically a deaf-blind endorsed interpreter that uses something called tactile sign language or haptic. And that is an additional combination that might be needed. They also tend to use SSPs or support service providers, and that might be something that needs to be, allowed as well. That helps them navigate the workplace. So just some additional considerations that might be a little outside of what we typically see or talk about when we're referring to communication barriers.
Great. Leah, I saw your hand come up and that Annie just recently talked. Oops, we lost our sign language. There we go. Okay. Leah, did you have something additional you wanted to add to that?
Yes, this is Leah speaking, and I want to make some brief comments. I know that we may have some individuals today that are tuning in for the first time. We did record some really awesome content over the last couple of days, but in the event that you're busy and cannot go back and review it, I just want to highlight, again, everyone's talking about the interactive process. This doesn't have to be a stressful or an uncomfortable conversation. It needs to be an environment that's confidential and comfortable so you can have the conversations about accommodations. Sometimes employees will know what they need, sometimes they will not. So there's an awesome resource called the Job Accommodation Network that you can look for different accommodations. Michigan Rehabilitation Services and the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons can also assist in developing some of those creative accommodations that would be helpful. Also, the last point I want to make is that it should be individualized. It should not be a one-size-fits-all situation. Now, if it works for multiple employees, great, but you do need to take the time to make sure that each individual employee is accommodated based on what their needs are. So those are just the brief comments I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. And I see Lolita has her hand up.
Yes, Lolita speaking. I just wanted to add and go back to like with the latex gloves. Some people have allergies, as a form of a disability. So an employer may have to not use latex gloves, but come up with some other type of gloves. A person that has anxiety going back into the workplace and say they have to participate in like staff meetings or training. I mean, for the last few months, we've been doing all this through Zoom. So that can be some kind of reasonable accommodation where the person can sit in their office and still participate with the staff meetings or doing the training. And one other thing, it's not the PPE, it could be individuals who may have fragrance sensitivity issues. And when you're purchasing wipes, the scented, you may want to switch and get unscented. So there's things that you could request from the employer because like Leah and everybody said, they can't read your mind. They don't know what you may need. So again, it's always best for you to tell them what you need, you know, like I need unscented. And then people with migraines, the scents could, you know, trigger a reaction. So I just wanted to say that.
Great, thank you. Very rounded.
Sorry, Robin.
Sorry, no, I apologize. It brought it on you. So this is Robin again. I want to throw this one out to all of you to react to. I know in our office, we have seen a lot of calls from businesses and from individuals related to some identification cards that were available and talked about on social media. They were distributed pretty widely, that were basically touting the Freedom to Breathe Association or Society type of a thing, that people had a right to this and such, and they could carry that card, and it was quote unquote endorsed by, you know, the federal government, et cetera, and that would get them a pass basically on having to wear a mask. All they had to do was flash that, and as the business or whoever, you know, couldn't question you or couldn't take any action such. Does anybody have any comments or experiences on that? Because I know that Department of Justice issued a statement nullifying it and making sure everybody knew that it wasn't an official statement, but just curious of what you've seen in Michigan with that. So I think, Kim, I saw your hand come up on that.
Yes, this is Kim speaking. Yes, Attorney General for Michigan, Dana Nessel, also issued guidance that was not a legitimate business. Under the ADA, you're not required to have any kind of cards or anything like that. And those are not legitimate. Please do not pay money to obtain such cards. Yeah, that's all I had to say.
Annie, you had your hand up earlier, so go ahead.
This is Annie speaking. I did want to add, you know, for me as a person with a disability, I just wanted to add to this and say, you know, other than seeing people with a disability and thinking, you know, that, oh, feeling, you know, that I need to buy this to be protected, you know, that is wrong. But I just want to stress that it's not the right thing to do. You know, in general, you know, that really ends up hurting the person with the disability in the long run. It doesn't benefit us. So I wanted to just comment and stress to say that really that is just wrong. And I hope to see people respect that and know that it's not the appropriate thing to do. So thank you.
Well, there's a lot of things that are out there on the internet. You can Google and buy everything from fake parking to you know, other kinds of things, you know, assistance dog leashes and vests and things of that nature that people are using. So I'm not surprised that, you know, part of human nature, something like this came up. But Lolita, I think you had your hand up. I don't know, before we move on, if you had something additional you wanted to add on this.
Yes, Lolita speaking. I was just reading an article about a viral TikTok, a video that went viral on TikTok. So the Freedom to Breathe agency is not a legit, well, you will not go to prison for up to 3 to 5 years, you know, if a business owner or you told someone to wear a mask. The cards are fake, and the DOJ said just because you have that card, you're not exempt from wearing a mask. And then I just wanted to reiterate what Annie was saying. As a person with respiratory issues, you can't just think about you have to worry about everybody else that it's going to impact. Even you going somewhere without a mask and taking it home to a high-risk individual. So just wearing the mask to protect you and others is recommended.
It's a very tough issue. And I think your conversations, discussions have highlighted that today, but also have provided some good thoughts for people to consider as they're working through this particular issue on their own, and understanding that, it's a process and it needs exploration, and there's not one size fits all for sure. Okay, let's move on to question number 4. Our next question is, do employers need to provide personal protective equipment, or PPE, or other protective accommodations to staff or service providers, such as ASL interpreters, who are assisting employees with disabilities? So this is a little different spin. This is not the actual employee themselves, but as you heard, I think Annie talked about, that somebody might have a tactile interpreter or something of that nature, or ASL, or you might have some kind of other supports being provided with you, job coaching, things of that nature happening. So I think this question directs to that. What is the employer's obligation for PPE to those that might be part of the facilitation of my accommodation? So let's see. Kim, do you want to start with that one? And
Sure. Well, it's 2 parts to it. So I will start. This is Kim speaking. And I will start by saying that, yes, OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Agency, requires employers to provide protective equipment for employees for dangerous conditions in the employment, at their place of employment. And with regards to providing PPE for interpreters or tactile interpreters, yes, the employer will have an obligation to provide protective equipment for the person's accommodation, essentially. I also wanted to mention, I know that there might be a question, or I think we had talked about it last week with employers, whether or not employers are required to provide PPE for employees working from home. And generally, employers are not required unless there's some kind of manufacturing or something happening in the home, just a general business working from home situation. An employer is not required to provide PPE in that situation.
Great. Did anybody else? Lolita, did you want to add? And then Annie, I see you. I'll get you next. So Lolita?
Yeah. Lolita speaking, it's not like a PPE, but again, Lolita here, flexibility from the employer. And I have certain equipment in my office, and my director allowed me to bring my air purifier home because I'm still working and I need that equipment for home. So it's still just flexibility from the employer. I know it's not a PPE, but still is equipment that I may need in my house.
Good point. Good point. Annie, do you have something to add?
Yes, this is Annie speaking. I have 2 points. First is specifically with the ASL interpreter, whether it's for the deaf person or a deaf-blind person who needs close contact. It's almost impossible to have that 6 feet distance when you're doing tactile interpreting, but flexibility, yes, that is very important, because from my perspective, the employer maybe also want to think about and consider that interpreter has other assignments. They're interacting with other clients. That employee is not the only client that the interpreter has. So it's a safety issue for everyone. So they should provide that PPE, because again, it's not just protecting that person, it's protecting the interpreter, the employee, and also it's, going to guarantee that it's going to protect the next person that they're interacting with. So that's very important. The other thing, I also think that many individuals who are deaf, blind, or hard of hearing, they may not know, okay, what resources are available for me as far as PPE goes. maybe I need a different type of PPE for myself. The state has, under the MEDC, they have a PPE portal that's accessible, and it will connect you to different Michigan businesses who are looking for protective gear, for like gowns, gloves, masks, face shields, all those different things. And so those businesses who have modified their equipment to make those PPEs. So I would encourage employees to visit that website so that they are aware that there are other options available for them. And the employer may not know that as well, so it will help.
Yeah, I think it's always good to come with some ideas for your reasonable accommodations, and so that you can more actively participate in that interactive process with the employer, because as somebody has said previously, to assume the employer knows what you need or knows, you know, all of these things, whether it's assistive technology or it's PPE or whatever, you know, that's typically not the case, you know, for most. So that any information I can help to share in that process, I think is very helpful. All right, why don't we go on to our next question, number 5. COVID-19 and its effects, such as prolonged isolation, temporary layoffs, etc., have taken a toll on the mental health of employees and employers. Are employers allowed to offer assistance or resources to employees exhibiting signs of stress, emotional instability, or other mental health related symptoms? So Linda, do you want to start us off with this one?
Sure, Linda Watson from MRS again. So employers should not make any assumption about anyone in particular, and they certainly can't single someone out on their staff in need, but they can make a global assumption that everyone in their workforce can benefit from a wellness program, mental health and mindfulness, any sort of self-care programming. I think right now it is so important for everyone to recognize how difficult these times are that everyone is experiencing. It's truly a unique time for all of us, and whether or not we've had a mental illness diagnosis before these times or we're experiencing mental health concerns at this time, there's such a huge stigma around it. We may not be reaching out for the help that we need. So employers can provide things to their employees to let them know what's available. So for instance, if you're working, one thing that might be available to you is some sort of employee assistance program or through your insurance. I'm not sure if folks know, but at this time, many practitioners are providing virtual appointments, online remote appointments, or even appointments over the telephone. And lots of insurance companies have either eliminated copays associated with some of those things, or they've greatly reduced them to make that accessible to people. And whether you're working or not, there's a lot of free resources that are available out there in the community, from webinars to warm lines. And in fact, the state of Michigan the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services released what we call a warm line, specific to help folks meet their mental health needs during COVID-19. So take this number down, because this is a really important one in case you need this. And the number is 888-733-7753. It runs 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. It's peer-led. So if you do have some concerns and you've never really talked to anybody, you're talking peer-to-peer with someone. And again, it's so important for people to realize that even if you're working from home and you have access to leave at home, your vacation, your sick leave, your annual leave, whatever your employer is calling it, it's still okay to take those days off and to do that self-care that you need to do to maintain good mental health. So not a short answer, but potentially the right answer for that question.
And Kim, could you address the fact that what if, and what should I be looking at if I'm concerned that the employer is singling me out? And you know, Linda's talked about offering all employees, you know, this access and such of that nature. But what if I feel that the employer, because maybe they did know I previously had a mental health issue that I've been managing and stuff that nature, and now they're concerned that, you know, maybe it's been exacerbated or whatever, so now they're treating me potentially, I mean, this is at least my perception that they are. Can you just speak to that issue a little bit so that people can understand the difference there?
Yes. This is Kim speaking. Without getting into the weeds and the legal technicalities, there are protections under the ADA that an employer can't regard somebody as being having a disability or having a history of, or treat them differently because they know they have a history of a disability, or just treat them differently because they have a disability from other employees. So that is illegal. The employee has protections against that, and the employer should not do that. As Linda mentioned, an employer may provide referrals or numbers or entities for assistance to all employees. And if an employer would like to do that, that's fine. But they should not single out any one employee. And Linda gave some great examples, so I won't try to go on. But no, an employer absolutely should not do that. That very well may be a violation of the ADA if they do in fact single a person out.
Great, thank you. Did anybody else want to add anything before we move on? Yes, Leah.
This is Leah from Services for the Blind, and I just wanted to quickly add that you may be a small business employer and you may not have those resources. So to piggyback on what Robin said and Linda initially, you know, pretty much everything can be found online, good or bad. So looking up those resources, there is a website. It's it's www.michigan.gov/staywell. If that's not correct, just go ahead and Google it, but there's tons of resources that can be used by everyone. They're really, really good, and it just provides another resource if you're a smaller business and you're not sure where to get those resources to help your employees. So that was just the small part I wanted to add. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Or if I work for a small employer that's not making those same things available to me, that's something that I could do and search on my own and reach out to those available resources. So thank you. Okay, we'll move on to question number 6. Question number 6, can employers lay off persons with disabilities due to business necessity? What can employees do if they feel they have been wrongfully laid off due to a disability, an accommodation request, etc.? Lolita?
Lolita speaking. So unfortunately, during this pandemic and the economy, the employer may lay you off, or they have been furloughs, you know, of individuals. And as long as they are not just singling you out, like I'm just going to lay off individuals that may have a disability or in a protected, you know, because of their age. As long as they are not participate, you know, no disparate treatment, then it would be, right now would be, it wouldn't be an issue under the ADA if they laid you off. However, say that if they wanted to, they laid you off for a minute and then say 3-4 months later, you realize that they were reinstating other individuals, recalling them from layoff and not you, then oh, excuse me, that would be a problem where you probably could file a complaint that you were denied, you weren't recalled because of your disability. So a lot of times the employers, what I see is that lack of transparency. So like if you're going to lay people off, it should be that you're like across the board, you know, you have a plan in place on why you are going to lay off cashiers or lay off the sales staff. And so as long as they're not discriminating against you because of your disability, your age, pregnancy, or anything like that, and you are, you know, then you would be protected to file a complaint with the ADA, with the EEOC, sorry about that, and then maybe even with the Michigan Department of civil rights. Now, one other thing that employers will do when they lay you off is they may give you this severance package in exchange for a general release. I'll give you $5,000 or whatever it may be, and you just go ahead and leave, but you got to sign this release. On the EEOC website, where it talks about what you should know during the COVID-19, they will address what an employer can put in that severance package. And again, you can go and read that on the website too, so that you will know, because a lot of times when they have you sign those releases, you're, excuse me, signing away, you know, you may have to give up a key at a house, you know, you're signing away so much. So just don't look at it like, oh, they're giving me $5,000. Read what you're signing and ask questions. And through this whole reasonable accommodation process, it is important for you as an employee to document any conversation that you may have with HR, ADR coordinator, you know, your supervisor regarding any request for a reasonable accommodation, so that it doesn't come back later and say you failed to engage in an interactive process. Leave as an accommodation is a very sticky situation, because if you're requesting indefinite leave, that's not reasonable, and the employer does not have to honor that. So document, know what you want and know what you need to get the job, to be able to perform the central functions of your job.
Lolita, can I just put a little different spin on that? Because we've had
Yes.
several questions come in our office, not about necessarily layoff, but where employers have been reducing pay, so that, you know, that they're cutting pay for all people in certain positions by 15%, 20%, or something of that nature. Would that be any different? If, you know, let's say I'm a person with a disability and, you know, they're doing that. So it's not just, you know, I'm not being laid off, but my salary's being cut and I'm still being expected to work 40 hours, but I'm now going to receive 20% or 30% less pay because of that. Can you address that in the similar context?
So Lolita, are they cutting the pay? You said it was, Robin, across the board?
Yeah, so it's similar.
So
like if I'm laying off people, instead of laying them off, I'm saying to all my employees, I'm going to cut your pay 20% or 30%. We get calls saying, well, they can't do that. I'm a person with a disability, you know, you know, that they have to pay me, you know, equal pay, equal work, you know, kind of a thing. And they're requiring the same number of hours, and isn't that against the law? You know, so we're getting those kinds of calls from people.
Well, Lolita speaking, if they're doing it across the board, it's going to be hard for you to show that you were discriminated against because of your disability. Now, they may want to contact the Department of Labor, Wage and Hour to see what they can do. But as far as with the EEOC, as long as it's across the board and they're not just singling someone out because of their protected basis, then we wouldn't be able to say that you were being discriminated against because of your disability. Now, if they cut the disabled people's pay by 50% and just, you know, a non-disabled person maybe by that 30%, then that would be a different issue, and that could be a violation under the ADA.
So Kim, could you just cover, you know, what my options are if I feel I have been discriminated against in regards to pursuing a claim of some type, either, you know, locally or federally or whatever?
Yep. This is Kim speaking, and Lolita mentioned it a little earlier. You could file a complaint with the local EEOC office. You can file a complaint with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. We also take complaints for EEOC. We are one of their partner agencies in Michigan, and I don't know EEOC's number, but I know MDCR's number. I can't think of the 800 number offhand, but 313-456-3700. That's 313-456-3700, or www.michigan.gov/m DCR. And people can use that as a resource to look into filing a complaint. And people also always have the option to obtain a private, well, actually, if it is 15 or more employees, they have to get their right to sue letter to go into federal court under ADA. You can always go into Michigan court under the Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act, and you could obtain a private attorney to do that just by, if you know an attorney, or going to the State Bar of Michigan looking for a labor and employment attorney or employment attorney.
Thank you. Lolita, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, Lolita speaking. And one other thing, we had started trying to go green and make everything digital prior to the pandemic, but since the pandemic, we're not doing that face-to-face, those face-to-face interviews, but you can go to the EEOC.gov website and look on there how to file a charge, because now you can just file a charge from the comforts of your home. You know, go in there and it's user-friendly. You know, you just answer the questions, you go online, you file that inquiry, somebody from the EEOC will give you a call back, draft that charge. You can do your electronic signature. Once you sign off on that charge, the notice is automatically sent to the employer so that they can respond to your allegations. So that is a resource that's available. But the phone number is 313-226-4600.
Great. And I think it was stressed yesterday, and I think this is a good time to stress it again, is that make sure you're documenting all of your circumstances and situations and who you've talked to and what you've done and things of that nature, because that's very helpful in the complaint process to have that. It's very difficult to recreate sometimes details after the fact and with any accuracy. So it's always better to have that kind of documentation. And that was said yesterday, but it doesn't hurt to remind today. And Kim, I saw you blip your hand up there quickly. Go ahead.
This is Kim speaking. I just wanted to add, if people are wondering how to document, you can document in a number of ways. Email is always good, or you can just keep you a piece of paper, a pad and a pen, and make simultaneous notes, or soon thereafter when you have conversations, who you had it with, the date, the time, and what the conversation was about. Those are the ways in which you can document.
Great. And we always tell people that even if you don't know if there's going to be a problem, it's a good thing to do just as a general practice, because it's never a problem until it's a problem. And then it becomes difficult to go through that recreation. So just thinking about that. Great. Thank you, everybody, for that. Why don't we move on to our next question? And this is our last question, and then we will open it up to individuals in our participants today to ask us some questions. So the next question is, many employers are looking to hire additional staff. What will employment opportunities look like for persons with disabilities as businesses re-engage? Linda, do you want to tackle that one?
Sure, Linda Watson here again with Michigan Rehab Services. So the labor market is really tight right now, and truth be told, it was tight before COVID-19. Many businesses experienced more openings than job seekers that were willing to apply in the state of Michigan, and that's a good thing. But it's a good thing for job seekers, not necessarily for the businesses that are seeking for them. Now with COVID-19, businesses are faced with an even bigger battle. They have staff that are fearful to return to work, and that fear makes sense to a certain extent. I encourage you, if you're looking to go back to work or looking for new employment, have conversations with businesses about their safety protocols, visit their websites, because most businesses actually have this information on their websites as well. But not only are businesses going above and beyond for their employees, but they're doing it for customer safety as well. So research that to help ease those fears a little bit. on your end. But in regard to employment for persons with disabilities, as far as what their employment outlook looks like before COVID, during COVID, after COVID, I'd love to say that it looks exactly the same as the able-bodied individual seeking employment, but it does not. However, there are some agencies out there that can assist you in that endeavor. Both MRS and Leah, who's on as well today from Bureau for Services for Blind Persons. We are both two agencies that represent state vocational rehabilitation. So we serve two customers. We serve that business, and we also serve individuals who are either seeking to obtain or maintain employment. So right now we're working remotely, like much of the rest of the world, but that doesn't mean we're not working on your behalf and to assist you to obtain employment and to maintain employment. So combined, MRS and BSBP have the largest population of individuals with disabilities seeking employment in the state of Michigan. So we're a really good resource for businesses who are seeking that talent and for individuals with disabilities who are seeking to become employed. So our candidate pool is anywhere from the legal working age up to however old you actually are that you want to still continue working. I personally, when I was a counselor, I think the oldest customer I had was about 83. However, we are a broad, widespread agency between the two programs that we have, both mine and BSBP. We represent individuals with all sorts of disabilities, but even more importantly, we represent individuals with all sorts of abilities. So individuals who maybe have more mechanical skills, maybe they're a certified MIG welder, or someone who has a Juris Doctorate and has previously practiced law. We have individuals that are seeking employment, seeking to maintain employment, like I said, but we help both individuals and businesses make that appropriate match so that way that employment outcome can be successful. And if supports are needed in that employment opportunity, both MRS and BSBP are here to assist that individual and that business to help that become, like I said, a successful employment opportunity. So we bring experience and resources and a willingness to help both those customer bases. And we really do love what we do. So if you're out there and you need help finding or maintaining employment, please reach out to one of our agencies.
This is Robin, and none of us has a crystal ball. So we don't know what, to say the future 6 months, 12 months or whatever is going to look for now. But do any of you have any thoughts about how you think the COVID-19 experience is going to potentially change the workforce going forward or the work world going forward? I can't imagine, given the number of months that people have been working in these kind of alternative situations, that there is not going to be some changes or some transformation, maybe, I don't know, that is going to occur going forward, even post-pandemic, if there ever is a post-pandemic. And Kim, I saw your hand go up first, and then Linda. Oh, I saw Annie too. So we'll get to you. All of you'll have a chance. Kim, why don't you start?
This is Kim speaking. I believe it will be very difficult for employers to say that it is unreasonable for an unreasonable accommodation to allow employees to telework from now on. Of course, you have to look at each job description, and you have to look at the essential functions of the job. However, I think for the most part, a lot of jobs have proven that teleworking is very doable and can be an effective and reasonable accommodation for employees and for employers to look at the cost savings for having employees work from home too, because you're not having to turn on lights and heat and air conditioning at a central location or locations when the employees are working from home.
Great. And Annie, I saw your hand go up. Did you have anything to say about that?
Yes, this is Annie speaking. It's more just a broad general comment. Me as a person with a disability, I think, given that many of us, you know, both the employers and the employees, members of the public, we are dealing with a high stress situation. I think it's important to take a broad view with this. This year, we celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. And we have seen a huge shift in how we think and look at work as a whole, how we are able to accommodate and meet the needs of individuals with disabilities who may need those accommodations to do their job. You know, technology has been a huge, huge shift in how we see and approach things. People who are deaf, blind, or hard of hearing can effectively interact with their coworkers now in the workplace through virtual meetings, interpreters, captioning, all those different things. So I think that the concept of being willing to be flexible and creative and find those solutions, it gives me hope that employers and businesses will see that and understand how they can really incorporate and make sure that their employees with disabilities can be part of the process, how they can be included. Again, speaking of accessibility, the concept, making that a part of the process. As you return to work, what is that going to look like? If we really strive for that kind of mindset where we're inclusive, that is, and it's a part of the process, we're going to see the system as a whole change. Individuals with disabilities who are searching for jobs or who want to work, they are going to feel more welcomed. They're going to feel more respected and more integrated into society as a whole. And so I think that, you know, mentioning that we haven't started this discussion yet, because right now, I mean, we're still dealing with the day-to-day experiences of COVID and what that means. So we haven't really thought about long-term, you know, perspectives of what employers could see in the workplace or what it could look like. Employees may be considering their jobs. So I'm hopeful that this kind of conversation will continue. And I think it's important that we continue this conversation because we're all learning new things now every day about how we are navigating through the workplace process. So I have hope that this conversation will definitely continue.
Thank you. Lolita.
Excuse me, Lolita speaking. I just wanted to say, while employers are using the resources that they have, like MRS, to hire individuals, I just want employees to know, just like when we discussed the layoff and the hiring and onboarding process, if the employer, excuse me, postpones the start date or withdraw the job offer, you wanna, they can't base that on your disability, your age, or if a person is pregnant, because they believe that you're in this high risk or severe, you may contact COVID. So again, in the hiring process, if there's any, they rescind the offer, if they postponed it or withdraw it, are they doing it across the board and not just singling somebody out because of their disability? And then they may want to reach out and contact somebody with the EEOC or MDCR.
Good reminder on that too, because sometimes we do get caught up in the other side of it. Leah.
This is Leah from Services for the Blind, and I just wanted to add a little bit. Linda already did a very excellent job about explaining state vocational services, but I really want to emphasize Services for the Blind. We work with individuals who are blind or severely visually impaired and the deafblind population. So our goal is to produce good talent for Michigan employers. And we do that through a variety of training programs, college education, job shadows, work experiences, I mean, the list, independent living skills, the list goes on. So that's our main goal. We are continuing to work remotely. You know, I am the deafblind counselor for the state of Michigan. So I am continuing to have those conversations virtually or on the phone with employers, employees, my clients. I have been able to successfully work with my clients and have obtained 2 employment placements since March, which is wonderful. So that shows that, you know, we are moving full steam ahead. We really love what we do. And if everyone can participate and is willing to come to the table, we are still placing clients. So I really just wanted to emphasize that while you may be, as an employer, you know, getting a person with a disability, you're also getting talent. And so we work really hard to make sure that we are producing and training talent in Michigan for employers. So thank you.
And it's good to know, those of you listening that are employees or potential employees seeking jobs, that you've heard, you know, that there are a number of resources available. If you're not familiar or have not used them before, or if you have and you were discouraged, reach out again. You know, times have changed, things are different, and, you know, always a fresh look and a new opportunity there. So thank you very much to our panelists for addressing the questions that we posed to you so far. Let's go on to the next slide, because now we are going to go into our phase where we're actually going to entertain questions from you, the audience, those of you that have been listening to us this whole time. I'm sure we have generated a host of thoughts in your mind that hopefully you jotted down and you're ready to share with us so that we can respond to you. So the chat box is now open for your questions. And if you want to go to the next slide, please, and I'll remind people how they can go about asking questions. Next slide. Thank you. So during this session, you can write your questions into the chat box. If you're on the phone, you can press *9 if you're on the phone, and we will recognize you. If you are in this platform and want to auditorily or by voice ask your questions, just click the raise hand option and we'll track you as well. And just again, note that we will not tolerate any inappropriate or threatening language, and we would potentially mute you or remove you from the session. So at this time, let's go ahead and see if we've got some questions from the audience.
Robin, this is the chat moderator. We do have a question. It says, if you are working from home due to COVID-19 and are completing all your work from home, can the employer require that you return to the workplace to work?
Okay, Lolita, I saw your hand go up on that one.
Lolita, I think we kind of discussed this, maybe it was yesterday. If you, during the pandemic, you have been working at home, and as long as you do not have any issues like productivity, you're getting all of your work assignments done, it's going to be hard for an employer to say that this would be an unreasonable accommodation for you to telework at this point. Now, are there other reasons why? Like, do they need you in the office? I don't know what your position is, but do they need you in the office to service the customers, you know, answer the phones? I mean, what would they need you to do as far as some essential functions of the job that would require you to go back in the workplace instead of working from home? But as long as you do not have any productivity issues or anything, it may be hard for the employer to come back now and say, oh, you can't telework.
And just a reminder to people, I think that Lolita was the one who had discussed this earlier on, that at this point, the EOC has not determined that COVID-19 itself is a disability covered under the ADA. So if I have had COVID and that's my reluctance to go back into the workplace, that by itself not necessarily sufficient. So just want to remind people that, so we don't get things confused there. Thank you. Our next question.
This is the chat moderator. We have a raised hand from Cynthia Paul. I'm going to go ahead and allow her to unmute.
Actually, I have 2 questions. I also threw them in the chat box. One is, can you please talk about the intersectionality between immune compromised, and the ADA and the persons with disabilities. And in particular, are people with diabetes, high blood pressure, or a spleen removal entitled to protections under the ADA or the persons with disabilities? And then the second question is, both Executive Order 36 and the Families First Coronavirus Response Act have huge exceptions, like all healthcare workers and first responders. And some of them do have disabilities. What are their rights in these situations where they have to report to work?
Okay, let's take those separately there and make sure I can remember those. So let's take the first part of the question, which was different types of disabilities that she asked about being covered under the ADA and the Michigan Persons with Disabilities Act, such as diabetes and things like that. So Kim, I saw your hand go up. Why don't you go ahead and take that one first?
Even within that, that was a two-part question asking about ADA and persons with disabilities civil rights.
Correct.
Yeah. But yes, diabetes, high blood pressure. I don't know about spleen removal, but I know that in the ADA regs, those are specifically mentioned. They have a non-exhaustive list of impairments that are considered disabilities because they affect different biological systems, for lack of a better word. And they are considered protected under the ADA through the ADA regulation, the DOJ regulations, I'm sorry. With regards to Michigan Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act, the Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act previously mirrored the ADA prior to the 2010 amendments. And after the 2010 amendments, Congress amended the ADA to extend the protection of what is considered disabled and to bring back the original intent of the act. And Michigan has not. So Michigan has a whole 20, 30 years of case law saying certain things had to show that you were substantially impaired. So to answer your question, would they be covered under Michigan? I don't know, because I think it's right for someone to argue that we follow the ADA and the ADA regs with regard, previously we followed the ADA and the ADA regs, and that we could continue to follow the ADA regs. So under the ADA, absolutely. Under Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act, it needs to be vetted through the courts.
And just for clarification, I think you were referring to the 2008 ADA Amendments Act, correct?
Yes, I'm sorry, 2008 ADA Amendments Act that went into effect 2009. I don't know why I mentioned.
No, because there were the 2010 Title II and Title III regulations were amended. Right. So that's people do get confused between what happened when. So yeah, definitely. Just want to make sure we're clear on that. And Lolita, I saw you raise your hand. I think you wanted to chime in there.
Yes, so Lolita speaking. So under the ADA, so is it a disability that substantially limits a major life activity? And is it a major bodily function, like respiratory issues are now covered? So someone with a weak immune system may be covered under the ADA. You just have to go through that process to find out if it's substantially limited major life activity.
Okay, now we'll move to the second part of her question, which was she was asking about the Executive Order 2020-36 and the Coronavirus Family First Relief Act, which she indicated has some exceptions in it. And she specifically cited the issue of first responders and healthcare workers as having exceptions. And so she was asking because there are people with disabilities who are employed in those fields and such. What, if any, protections do they have, or do those exceptions rule them out because of the way that they're written? So I think that was her question there. So Kim, I saw you up and down there, so I don't know if you're retracting or if you're still good to take that one.
No, I just wasn't going to keep my hand up.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's okay, good, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so without giving a government lesson, which I don't really want to do, state law, executive order, says that people have these protections except first responders. However, you have federal law, which state law can make it broader, but it can't make it more narrow. Yeah, it can make it, no, I'm sorry, state law can't make it more narrow. I'm sorry, it can't make it more broad, it can make it more narrow, I'm sorry. It can make it broader, can't make it more narrow. And ADA provides protections if a person has a impairment that's substantially, a mental or physical impairment that substantially affects one or more life activities, they are protected. So to answer your question, if a first responder or
Healthcare worker,
although essential workers, that was the word I was looking for.
Essential worker, yeah.
If an essential worker has an impairment that substantially affects one or more major life activities, then that person is protected under both state and federal law.
So the fact that basically that the state law is present, it in this case may get trumped by the federal law. Lolita, did you want to add to that?
Yes, Lolita speaking. A lot of times what happens, if you're an essential employee and you have a disability, yes, you can go through that reasonable accommodation process. But if you're just not wanting to return to work because of fear of being around the public or patients, it may cause an undue hardship for that employer unless they have, so patients, RNs, do they have enough RNs that can cover all of the shifts? But is it just your fear factor, or is it because of your disability? You want to be clear, because if it's just that you're afraid to go in the workplace, that may not be a legitimate reason for them to say, okay, we're going to accommodate you. But is it because of your disability, something with your disability that may not allow you to go back to the workplace right now? Maybe they can come up with leave as an option, again, not indefinite leave because that's not reasonable, or can you be reassigned to another position? And a lot of times with those reassignments, you may have your pay may be reduced. So I just want you all to be mindful of the fact if you are an essential employee, and if the employer's defense is that it could be an undue hardship, then it may be a problem under the ADA.
Great, thank you. Next question, please.
This is the chat moderator, and just as a reminder to all of our panelists, please do say your name before you speak, even when you chime in. I just got to notice that our captioner was having some trouble keeping up with the different comments. So we do have a question about accommodations. What accommodations need to be made for persons that are hard of hearing, who rely partially on lip reading when wearing masks are required?
I thought you might raise your hand there, Annie. Why don't you go ahead?
Sure, this is Annie speaking. Yeah, so specifically when we're talking about masks, you do see some companies that are making the clear masks. I have one with me as an example that I'll show you really quick. This is what they look like. And that helps the person to be able to see the lips. So if you'll have some ability to see facial expressions and body language. And some people are also recommending face shields. They're clear face shields, anti-fog. But understand it's still very important that you wear a mask under the face shield for additional protection. And if you have no ability to get a clear mask or a face shield, if you don't have those resources, you still need to be able to communicate, of course. So you can download a speech to text app for your phone. or it can be used on a computer, and that will help with some sort of communication too. There's also different assistive technology available. And one of the other things that might also be helpful as a simple short-term solution to interaction is as easy as just pen and paper and writing back and forth that way. You can have a whiteboard that might make it more simple too. And it obviously depends on your situation and what the content is, but that can be a quick solution. But you know, it depends on the person who's requested the accountability or the accommodation. We have to make sure that we're able to match what they need.
Anyone else? Okay, next question, please.
This is the chat moderator. If an employee works in a healthcare setting and requests an accommodation to not work around COVID-19 positive patients due to their disability, but all of the workplace has interaction with these patients that are COVID-19 positive, how can the employer accommodate this?
Kim.
This is Kim speaking. You may have heard us several times mention that an employer has a duty to provide a reasonable accommodation. And if an employer, if the majority of the patients or all of the patients are COVID-19, it may not be reasonable for the employer to be able to provide the accommodation requested by the employee to not have to work around COVID-19 patients. So in that case, there may not be a reasonable accommodation for an employee. And that happens sometimes, not a lot of times, but that does happen sometimes. So they may not be able to provide an accommodation for that employee. So the employee may have to look at alternatives like an alternative accommodation, like leave as an accommodation, or change. I don't know if they have another facility, a different job that doesn't handle COVID-19 patients, to go to a different facility or to a different position. And as Lolita mentioned earlier, sometimes that different position may come with a different pay scale. And with going to another facility, the employee may incur additional costs having to drive to and from the facility.
Right, and I think that was Lolita's discussion about reassignment as a reasonable accommodation. So we've kind of had a lot of conversation and discussion about both leave as a reasonable accommodation and reassignment as reasonable accommodations. So definitely. Lolita?
Lolita speaking, and I just wanted to add, so if you request a reasonable accommodation, you don't want to work with the individual's patients who have COVID-19. And then the employer comes back and say, okay, well, we'll make sure you have all of the personal protective, equipment, the PPEs that you need. What type of PPEs would you need to make you feel more comfortable coming in the workplace? From the mask to the shield to the, like lab coats, jumpers.
Gowns, yeah.
Yes, thank you, gowns, or, that's engaging in that interactive process too. Like, how can they help you where you will feel more comfortable with working with the patients, from the gloves to the gowns to the masks to covering up your feet or whatever it may be. My daughter says she goes to this place to get her nails done. And it's like when she walks in there, it's like they're going to do surgery because they're covered from like head to toe. So you also want to think about those PPEs, also, when you're having that conversation, dialogue with that employer.
And I think that's a really good point to remind people about the fact that your preferred accommodation may not be the accommodation that you actually receive. And that's where that interactive process is so important, that you start out with what your request is for an accommodation, but with the interactive process, you may be exploring a variety of different options, which again, may not be your preferred, but if it's effective, then that is what the employer's obligation is to provide you. So I think it's important to keep that in mind as well. Well, we are at the bottom of the hour, which means that we have been very active for the last hour and a half. And I'm sure we've left some people hanging without their questions being answered, but I know that the plan is to be able to address those questions after the fact to help people get some answers. So we just stay tuned on how they're going to be able to do that. They'll get some information out to you related to that. Can I have the next slide, please? At this point, I would like to give thanks to our panelists for sharing their expertise during today's session. They did an excellent job in the last couple of days, and I think and hope that everyone feels that they've been able to learn and grow from this experience and take away from it some additional thoughts that may necessitate that you do some more research and give you some ideas of how this might impact you or affect you. I also would like to thank the Department of Labor and Economic Development, LEO, and Deputy Director Sean Egan for providing our opening remarks today. I also want to thank our ASL interpreters, Toy Bogan and April Davidson. And please note that today's virtual session and captioning was graciously coordinated by the Deaf Professional Arts Network, or otherwise known as DPAN. Next slide, please. So again, thank you for joining us today and yesterday, hopefully, again, for additional ADA 30 sessions as we continue to celebrate the ADA 30th anniversary. Go to www.michigan.gov/ADA30, and you'll see share your story in social media by using hashtag ADA30 and hashtag MIADA30. in order to link to other stories and other discussions of this type in Michigan. So again, thank you one and all, and everyone have a great rest of your day.